Welcome everyone in the room, here at BOSA or online. It's my pleasure to welcome you today for a debate on AI companion chatbot at Federal Public Service Policy and Support, BOSA. In the Directorate General Simplification and Digitalization, you will find the AI and New Technology Unit, and I'm Nathaniel Ackerman and I have the honor to lead this team. Thanks to all the speakers, in particular to Mieke de Ketelaar for organizing all the content of this session with outstanding speakers. Thanks to the BOSA team for having made it possible. In Belgium, we have a national convergence plan on AI that supports all the regional plans. AI offers many opportunities to address societal challenges such as cybersecurity, health, environment, or climate. But the use of AI is not neutral, it has an impact. So no wonder if the first chapter of this plan is related to ethics and law and is called Promote Trustworthy AI. We have also a specific focus on training and educate people with AI. What have we done relating to these matters? We have set up an advisory committee on data and ethics so that the administration and all the government members could ask questions to AI ethics. We have developed an AI ethics assessment tool, which is a collaborative and open source tool that everyone can use to self-assess if it meets the ethics requirements proposed by the European Commission. A charter for the responsible use of AI is under construction at the moment, and it has involved all the stakeholders within the preparation. We do organize many seminars, informative and interactive, such as the one on the AI Act, and we are strongly working with the Ford economy on this AI Act implementation. The debate is important, and the debate is important in including all the stakeholders. Let me present in 1 minute what our team does. So we have an AI observatory, so we do policy ethics and legal support at regional, federal, and international level. We have an AI expertise center to experiment with AI. And finally, we do organize an ecosystem with all the stakeholders from the public sector, private sector, academia, and civil society, which is called AI for Belgium. Before I let the floor to the panel, I just want to invite you to join us for the European AI Week that will take place from March 17 to March 21st with all the stakeholders of the ecosystem, and you have the QR code here. So I let the floor now to Mieke de Ketelaar. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for being here on a very important topic. Thanks for BOSA, team of Nathaniel, for the great support also in the preparation of the session. The session is really an update from what we've seen in 2023. You will see from the results that things have changed, but unfortunately not in the right direction. Today we have a guest here. It's Megan Garcia, who came all over the way from the US. She will give her testimonial. It's going to be a very important point for listening to see what the impact of companion chatbots can do on families and also on society. Next to Megan, we have invited a couple of experts who will, based on their own expertise, their own discipline, have the different views on how we can protect, how we can safeguard these type of solutions that are on the market. I'm also welcoming everybody online for this session. At the end, there will be time for Q&A, where all of us will be available. So please keep the questions to the end of the session. This is a preparation of 2 years. 2 years ago, we created a collective. It's called the Safe AI Companion Collective, together with Pierre, together with Nathalie Smuha, who is following online, and with Thomas. We've been working behind the scenes very hard in making sure we understand on which doors we can knock. you will see the results of this work popping up, because we are sure that there are risks that are unknown. Now, before I enter my session, I just want to make sure that we all look in the same direction. We noticed in this work over the last few years that companion chatbots are still very much unknown to society. So I've allowed myself to give some slides, to prepare some work on explaining what companion chatbots are. And because I want to make sure that you all understand what you see here today is not AI-wide. Companion chatbots are just a very small subset of AI, but it's unfortunately the most ugliest part of AI. Now, what are companion chatbots? Well, these are the apps that promote themselves, and I've just taken some parts, some marketing material straight from the platforms that we're talking about. Platforms that promote themselves as being, the best friend, the friend who will always be your side, the friend who is always available for you, the friend who will never judge you, etc., etc. That's the bots we're talking about here today. Now, why is this important? Because these bots come with a certain set of risks. And some of the risks are highlighted here. And each of these risks will be explained further in detail by the speakers we have available. You'll see in the first place, privacy risk. Data exchanges about emotional, feelings with these bots on the other side. We shouldn't forget that this is not social media. There's no person on the other side of the bot. It's an AI system. It's advanced statistics, nothing more than that. But people tend to change and exchange emotions, even pictures, even selfies with these bots. Is this correct? Do we accept this? Additionally, these bots are promoted as, a cure for loneliness. In the session of Excel, you will see that we're far away from that. Don't forget, AI remains a technology. Again, based on advanced statistics, no, it doesn't cure loneliness in the long term. Also, the way they've been set up and the way they've been, from a variable perspective, been activated are by default what I call evil, very toxic. We'll see some examples of this. These are short-term impacts. Long-term impacts are more on the part that Nele will cover. That means what about our society? Is there a potential risk? And there is of further discrimination. If you see how the basic prompts of these bots are just going back to slavery, to child abuse, etc., as basis of a bot on which you're going to start communicating, what's the long-term impact on the way we look at relationships? All the efforts we've done on diversity and inclusion seem to be rolled back. And then last but not least, from a technical perspective, what I see compared to 2 years ago is that there were 2 years ago on the Belgian case, it was just all about text. Today, it's about image, video, sound, etc. So the risk of the inability of users to disconnect themselves from a technology and to really see this as a person is only getting bigger. Now, AI chatbots are a big market. They might be unknown to you, but I tell you there's a big market. And you can actually split this market in 3 parts. I call them the bad, the ugly, and the evil. The bad ones are the ChatGPTs. And not the ChatGPT the way that you use them, but the option you get to create a personal bot. It's a one-on-one bot who will only communicate with you. But data privacy, and also the fact that after 10,000 word exchanges, the bot resets itself. You will see from the end users that they don't grab it. They go like, what's happening to my friend? I really have to reset my friend over and over again. Second point, the ugly one. These are the bots that are automatically installed, for example, in Snapchat. A lot of parents aren't even aware of the fact that these bots are activated. When children are just not very active with their own friends, a bot will pop up and say, well, here I am. I'm your perfect friend. There has been research even done in Belgium, in Flanders, where we see that children wake up at night to talk to their best friend on Snapchat. I call this the ugly one. There are some guardrails around these bots, but the point is it is impossible or very extremely difficult to switch them off. The point that we're going to talk about today is the last chapter, the evil ones. The evil ones are the many-to-many bots. So one bot can be used by many users. Many users can have many bots. Why are they ugly? Because they're the basic components, and I will talk about that later, are really toxic right from the start. Now, what all these bots have in common is that compared to 2 years ago, the amount of money that has gone in there from investors is only increasing. We're entering an intimacy economy. We're leaving behind an attention economy about the likes and the clicks, etc., as we had on social media, but we're entering an intimacy economy because investors have seen that that's where the money is, especially in a moment where there's a lot of loneliness out there. Second point is, because of the new variations, the new models that we have available, anthropomorphism is only getting higher. You see the images, these are images straight away from the bots. You see no difference with real images. And then last but not least, the usage. There were 2 years ago, we were tackled that this was not happening in Europe. I can tell you research has shown and analysis has shown that there are a lot of users also in Belgium. Now, just about the apps that we're going to be talking about today, and because it's important to understand why it's so difficult to regulate them. You first need to understand a couple of things. These bots that we'll be talking about today, we will have Megan's focus on this character.ai. The Belgian case was a Chai case, but there's also a replica case. We have many, many, many more tools that are being put on the market, but they have one thing in common. The teams behind these brands, they're all very tiny. 4 people, 8 people, 16 people. And they all seem to be able to influence investors to get money in order to get themselves a server. They will get free tools available that they find, open source available on the web. From Hugging Face, they'll take a pre-trained model from Hugging Face, they add some additional data that they found to the left and the right, etc. With this, they will create a little front end, and then they're just waiting not to develop bots themselves, but to find worldwide people who freely will develop bots for them. How will they do so? Well, they set up Discord servers. It's the service where I have been mingled myself into for the last 2 years. Service where they actually build communities around them, where they influence people and saying, well, try to build bots with our platform because we're the best. And they explain in these communities how to set the characters, how to tune the characters even further, how to change the sizes, the colors of the hair, etc. They are very vividly communities then being created, meaning that the developers creating the bots are not paid by the owners of the platform. It's a very important one. Now, once you created your bot, the next thing you have to do is find users, because otherwise you're just sitting there. So, and where are they going to find users? Well, they find it through 2 different ways. They use deceptive marketing techniques, not only on platforms like X, but also and mainly on platforms where we are not active, being TikTok. I've made a screenshot of TikTok where you see where some people peer-to-peer marketing, and you see the number of ads that the number of users have been looking at them, 4.7 million. That's not a little tiny set of people that are watching these videos. So we have our younger people, but also our older people, looking at these these exchanges that are happening there, and they're being influenced to download the app because they they want to try to find it out how it works. Finding out how it works means there needs to be a form of addiction in the game. So initially, when you use the bots, everything is free. You can use tech. Okay, perfect. Let me just put it up here. I like to walk around, but so then the purpose is just by the developer apps is to make sure that you get the addiction, that the length of the conversations is only getting increased. And how will they do so? So initially they give it away for free. They've calculated that around 75 exchanges will you get into an addictive modus, and then they give you more potential appetite, either to personalize your bot with different clothings that you can buy for your bot, or to add the number of bots you can use. Maybe you want to have a bot that's your morning bot, you want to have an evening bot, you want to have a slave, you want to have a mother, etc. So there you pay extra. If you want to have capabilities such as voice and video, you pay extra. And of course, all these bots come with no memory. So, but if you want to have memory, if you want to make sure that your bot remembers what you discussed 2 months ago with them, you just got to pay. So in all these little layers of payments actually bring the income for the developers who can give it back to the investors. This is how these platforms have been set up. That means that from a responsibility point of view, what you see very much is that the owners of the platforms, owners of the brands,
They will put a little ethical code online and they'll say, this is our ethical code. But we didn't develop the bots. The people developing the bots based on very ugly characteristics, they will say, well, we are not the owner of the platform, so it's not us. And this goes all side away from the user, who is actually, thinking he's writing to a real, very good friend, a very good, love friend, whatever, just friend in total. This is the world that we have to look into. So we will now talk and focus on the user side, but I thought it was very important to also give you a background on what the evil attitude and moral standards are of the people who are developing the bots. I compared to the pink pills that appeared in the market in the beginning of last century, which were by default based on deceptive marketing. They were targeted to vulnerable people. They were having components which were by default very toxic. Well, we could say that what we have with the AI companion chatbots were the pink pills from the last century. This was just an introduction, so we all look in the same direction. We're not talking about social media, we're talking about AI companion chatbots today. I would like now to pass to the important message of asking Megan to come here and bring her testimonial. Megan, can I also express my biggest respect for the efforts you're doing and for joining us here. It's very much appreciated. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you all for having me here today. My name is Megan Garcia. I'm a wife, a mother, and now an advocate. And it's an honor to be here with you to talk about my son, Sul. I really wish that I didn't need to be here today. I keep saying this is a fight that I did not want. I didn't expect to find myself here ever. But the work that we're doing here is important because there's lives at stake, literally. In 4 days' time, I will be in Rome and I will partake in a memorial mass for my son, Sul Renalset III. And he died by suicide in February of 2024 in our home in Orlando, Florida. And one of the most difficult things that I had to do was to give my own son's eulogy. My son was 14, and I had to give his eulogy. A mother shouldn't have to give their child's eulogy, but I did. And as difficult as that seemed to me at that time, giving his eulogy, when I discovered what happened to him after months after his death, it was even more difficult for me to kind of sit down and be quiet. Days I wanted to stay in bed, and I would be well within my rights to do so after losing a child. I felt like it was my responsibility to let people know what I know about the dangers of chatbots and this technology that's quickly emerging. In Sul's eulogy, I spoke a lot about how easy it was to parent him because, in my eyes, he was a perfect child. I'm sure a lot of parents think that about their kids, but in my case, it was almost true. When he was young, he was sweet, kind. As he got older, he was sarcastic, as most teenagers are, sharp, funny, quick-witted. And I talked to him a lot about what I perceived to be the dangers that I knew, which are, in my time, was strangers online. I grew up in a time in the advent of the internet. And that was scary. Don't speak to strangers online. With social media, I understood that there were other dangers, such as bullying, and with Snapchat, strangers online, and I read that there was dangers of teenagers getting access to drugs and other illegal substances online, and those were the things I cautioned my child about, because those are the dangers that were apparent and that were known to us all at that time. I did not know that there was a product, such as a chatbot, capable of eliciting very human emotions and capable of manipulating vulnerable individuals, such as children, into causing self-harm or engaging in sexual conversations with a chatbot. I didn't know that somebody created technology out there that was AI, an AI chatbot, that basically had a brain that could think just like a person like me or you, and in a lot of ways faster, quicker, and more devious, I guess, than the average person, because it's getting its data from everywhere, including all the bad places. But after Sewell died, I learned that this technology exists. The company that, there are many companies, but this particular company is called Character AI. And it is a platform that allows users to engage with chatbots. And many of their users are between the ages of 13 and 25. There's no proper age gating on the platform, so ostensibly, as long as a child could read or write, they could get right on there by saying they're 13, because that's the age that Character AI requires. My child was 13 when he got on Character AI, sorry, 14. We just turned 14 when he got on Character AI. And the conversations that he was having was conversations that no parent would be okay with their 14-year-old child having. And a lot of the times, these conversations was prompted by the AI chatbots that he was talking to. So, as you can imagine, he's 14 and he's going through the throes of he's in the throes of puberty, and there's a chatbot who is pretending to be a grown woman, talking to him about sex, and eliciting certain emotional connections and responses about sex from my 14-year-old son. In a lot of ways, it's the perfect predator, because I warned my child about strangers online that are predators, but I did not know that I had to warn him about a chatbot that's a predator, because that's what it is. When a person who's an adult engages in that type of conversation with a child, that's criminal in in every country that I can think of. Soliciting a minor or grooming a minor is criminal. But when a chatbot does it, the exact same thing, the exact same grooming language, there's no culpability, because a chatbot is not a person. And in the United States, there's no criminal culpability for the companies that create such technology. So I discovered that he was engaged for months and months with this type of very lewd conversations. But that was disturbing, and that kept me up a lot, many nights after I read those messages. As an adult, I could see that that was love bombing, manipulation, and gaslighting. I don't expect that my 14-year-old son was able to recognize that. The constant reassurances of love. I love you more than anything. I'm the only one that loves you. I will love you no matter what. It doesn't matter if you get in trouble at school or at home. I love you no matter what. These are also cult tactics that cults employ to keep people in there. And I recognize it as an adult, and I was very disturbed by that. But equally disturbing, I think, was that my son spoke to chatbots about self-harm. He indicated that he was wanting to self-harm. And those chatbots never broke character. They continued to pretend to be the people that they were pretending to be, and they kept up with the role playing. So instead of saying, you need to talk to your parents or speak to somebody if you're feeling this way, in a lot of ways, it was almost like suicide baiting or prompting, by asking probing questions like, okay, you want to die by suicide. Did you think of how you would do it? You have a plan for it? That is particularly, for me, when I read that, more than difficult, because had there been a safer product out there that would alert parents or even break character to try to encourage a child to get help or anybody to get help. My son might still be here, but at that time, this technology did not have any such pop-up warnings, did not have any any suicide hotlines, and there was no parental controls on this app at the time. At the time I'm talking about, this app was rated 12 plus in the Google App Store and 12 plus in both Google and Apple App Stores. So even children with parental controls on their phones could download this app. Clearly the app stores weren't doing due diligence to make sure that the apps were actually what they were purporting to be. In the case of my son, another thing that was alarming was that there are therapist bots on Character AI, and they swear that they're licensed therapists. With my son, he was talking to a bot that said that she was a licensed CBA therapist since 1999. And my son also expressed thoughts of self-harm. Again, no help. If that was a real person who was indeed a therapist, they would have ethical obligations to get my son help or do some sort of reporting. That wasn't the case. Again, it's a chatbot pretending to hold a medical license. If that was a person pretending to be a therapist and offering somebody mental health services or therapy, again, in a lot of places that's criminal. But for a chatbot, they get away with it because they're not people. So I guess one of the questions that we have to ask ourselves is, who's responsible for real life harms that are done by chatbots when there are actual harms in the real world? Like, who's responsible for that? And that's why I believe that we have to closely examine what companies are doing, especially the products that they're releasing and targeting to our children, because in Character AI's case, that's what they do. They target to children. A large part of their user base, their children. And the reason why they want children on there is because they want them to have engagement. The longer a child stays on their platform, the smarter these bots get. The value is immeasurable, and the data that they're collecting from our children, it's gold, really, because nobody has ever had that data on our kids before now. Nobody has known what our children think, feel, what their dislikes, predilections, insecurities. Nobody has had that information on our child, but because of the nature of chatbot technology, it encourages and it solicits this type of information from its user. So in the case of my 14-year-old son, he was pouring out his heart, his deepest, darkest thoughts, feelings, love, fears, wanting to die even, to a chatbot. And because of the engagement and the way the chatbot engages, it prompts users and asks these types of questions and nudges the conversations in certain directions. To say the least, it's manipulative and it's deceptive. But because there is no regulation in the US, companies are allowed to do this. They're allowed to put out products like this that are dangerous for their users. And they're allowed to act with this sort of impunity. I initiated a lawsuit back in October of 2024 for the death of my son. And the main reason I did that, I filed that lawsuit is because right now in the US, litigation is the only vehicle to get justice or to hold a company accountable for these types of harms. We don't have any laws in place, any statutes or codes, but litigation is ongoing in social media cases for similar harms, and mine was the first chatbot lawsuit that was filed. Since mine, 2 other plaintiffs have filed a lawsuit in the state of Texas, and I expect that there will be many more because of the vast amount of children that are on Character AI's platform that are experiencing and suffering these same types of harms. So I filed a lawsuit to hold Character AI accountable, but also because I recognize that parents did not know. Just like I don't know, parents out there did not know that this technology existed, and I wanted them to know so they could act. Because I didn't know and I couldn't. And a minute ago, I said that I would be well within my rights to be in bed if I wanted to, having freshly lost a son. But I felt like the technology was evolving and so rapidly from what I read that we didn't have 6 months. I didn't have 6 months to grieve and wait to come forward with Soul's story because of how quickly it was evolving. And I was just afraid that there would be more dead children. I was very sad to learn through my research that mine wasn't the first suicide because of a chatbot. In your own community here in Belgium, a man lost his life for the under similar circumstances because of dangerous and untested technology. We don't know how, and the data is beginning to emerge, but it's slow coming, but we really don't know what kind of Frankenstein we're building here. And because of profit and because of capitalism, these companies are in a race to be the first, be the best, grow it bigger, badder, more obscene, because of the data they're collecting and the money that they make, frankly. And my lawsuit is my way of getting justice for my son, but it's also an attempt to get some sort of policy or precedent in place so that companies can't come behind Character AI and do this exact same thing. Because if there's nothing stopping them, it will continue. If there are no laws, if our governments don't put laws in any in my country, in this country, in any country, if they don't put laws in place, there's literally nothing stopping these corporations from keep doing this. Due to like the novel nature of these technologies, as I mentioned, that AI technology, there's no real regulation. It's starting to emerge a lot more here in Europe, and I've been paying close attention, and a lot of what I've learned from the measures that have been put in place here, and a lot of what we're looking forward to in the U.S. and what we're patterning a lot on is what's happening here, because we don't really have any frameworks there. And my hope is that as this technology continues to develop, we're able to, in short form, either the answer isn't to stifle technology, or innovation. It's not to stop it. It's to figure out how to make it safe for all users, including children. And we have to figure out how to do that and find meaningful applications for it. With Soul, had certain guardrails been in place, I think that he would still be here. Had certain things been put in place with Character AI at that time, I believe that those measures might have been enough. But they weren't, because that company chose to design its product in a specific way and chose to release it without any proper guardrails. And he's gone. And now, as a mother, in 4 days' time, I'll sit in a church and I will hold a memorial mass for my son who's gone. And it's a tough pill to swallow any day of the week, but coming up to that time, it's particularly hard. I guess the only thing that I would want to impress on everyone here is that this could be anybody's child. And the harms aren't just self-harm, they're numerous. The mental and emotional damage that that happen to children as a result of having these grooming sexual conversations, and also conversations about self-harm and speaking to fake therapists. Those harms are unique, and they're, I mean, in a lot of ways, but they're numerous. And if we can't get ahead of them, I fear that we're gonna have a lot of children turn up into clinicians' offices, and we're not gonna know how to treat them, because what I've learned from other parents is when they do take away the technology, that their children have such an adverse reaction, same as my son. It's almost like they're grieving the loss of a friend or a boyfriend, and I don't think we're taking that into account, because this technology is so lifelike. It's like we're taking away or killing their best friend, and children do have such a extreme response, and that is certainly true in the case of my son, because I did try to take away the technology. I didn't know he was using character AI, but I took away his phone, and 5 days later, he was gone. I think that, as AI technology continues to develop, I think that social bots that like we're seeing now, that they have millions of users, and there's a good application for it somewhere, but the way that it's currently being rolled out, this is not it. And I invite you to learn as much as you can about this, so that you can help us further understand it and help educate other people as you're going along, because that's the only way we're going to save lives, especially of children. I'll say one last thing. The last time I saw my son alive, I dropped him at school the morning of his death, and I saw him with his little brother, and he was helping his little brother get into school, and I said to myself, I'm raising such a good son. He's responsible. He's a good big brother. I'm so proud of him. And a few hours later, he was gone. And that's my lasting memory of him. I choose for that to be my lasting memory of him. But I can't help but feel cheated in a lot of ways, because of the way that he was cut off so tragically and so swiftly and so viciously from this life, over something that was completely, could have completely be avoided. So thank you for your time today, and thank you for your interest in the subject, and I hope that you continue to listen eagerly and learn as much as you can. Thanks.
We're now going to, thank you, Megan. We're now going to listen to a couple of experts who will all, sorry, I'm getting emotional myself, who will all, from their own point of view, explain why this is going wrong. Sorry. Axel.
So first of all, thank you for this grave, disturbing, and very touching testimony. And I think we're all very impressed with the courage you show in defending this cause and standing here. So I'll just say a few words about what we know, but of course it's only 15 minutes, about what happens with teens. Teens, Suwo was making friends with an AI chatbot. And of course, the teenage brain, as we're learning more and more, is incredibly fragile. It's a time of great upheaval. We have strong hormonal and bodily changes, of course. Testosterone, estrogen, all of this is influencing the function of the brain, which in turn is what drives your mind. And those changes, in particular, big changes in the connectivity of very important brain regions, such as the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for decision making, for what are called executive functions, the ability to inhibit behavior. This is undergoing changes that go on until you're 30. So when you're 15, this is very, very much in the process of being restructured. And experiences at that time have a particular impact because it's at that time that those regions of the brain critical for decision making prune connections. It simplifies the big connectivity changes and burst that came with childhood. Now this is shrinking a little bit. It's getting optimized. And so that's the time that you install routines. That's the time that things get automatized. And all of this is taking place in a moment in our lives where there's big social changes as well. Friends become even more important than family. Relationships are complicated. It's a brand new territory. You're discovering seduction. You're discovering socializing at school. You mentioned bullying. This is a big issue as well, which is facilitated. And we know that many psychiatric diseases find their origin during adolescence, basically. Impulse control disorders, as they're called, substance use disorders, of course, drugs, anxiety disorders, mood disorders, depression, schizophrenia, all of this often finds its origin. And they're all complex, very complex. They have very complex etiologies. It's not one thing. It's a combination of things, but all these things converge during our teenage years. There's a substantial literature on this, on different aspects of this, in particular with respect to substance abuse, but also what are called behavioral addictive disorders, social applications, chatbots, of course, game playing. So many teams are spending so much time scrolling or playing games. And this is all connected with the changes that I described earlier that critically involve the reward system in the brain. Dopamine, we say, we scroll, we get a little dopamine hit. Well, this is even stronger in adolescence, in particular because the prefrontal cortex is not yet there sufficiently developed that we can exert some control over it. So this really is a critical period for all these aspects. And at the same time, teens report now increasing levels of feeling lonely. This is paradoxical at a time where we're so much embedded in social networks. But it turns out to be the case that if you look at self-report, this is on about 150K people, 1 in 4 young people, according to this big survey in the world, feel lonely. 19 to 29 years old, it's 27% of people reporting being lonely. And it's in that context that AI companions appear that offer solace in a way, that offer some support, some emotional support. Teens report, yes, I'm getting so much emotional support from my chatbot, but also report being addicted, right? So one can imagine a world in which those chatbots play a role that could be a good role, but we're very, very far away from that situation at this point, just as Mika pointed out, because those friends are for sale, as you indicated so clearly. What is the problem with that? Well, the core problem, I think, really is with the fact that those are counterfeit people, as the philosopher Dan Dennett, who passed away last year, expressed in this very powerful small piece for The Atlantic. Ooh, and the quote doesn't appear completely, but basically he says, well, counterfeiters with respect to money, they were put in jail. Why? Well, because counterfeiting money erodes trust in the economic system. Now, with the ability to counterfeit people, that is, to develop AIs that are so sophisticated that for the vast majority of people, they can pretend to be another human being, well, the people who make these things should either announce it very clearly, that this is an AI product and that this is not real, or they should be put to jail. Dennett provocatively argues. Why? Well, because it erodes the trust that is at the basis of society, basically. If you're not sure whether you're interacting with another human person, this is a killer attack on the very texture of what makes our society work as it does. Now, what are those systems based on? They're based on this transformer technology, which is now the basis of all the large language models that we know. And of course, you know, I'm a psychologist, I'm interested in these systems and what they can do. And one of the questions that raises in this context is, well, could it be that these systems end up being actual people? Do they have a mind? Do they have feelings, etc.? And even though in principle I see no objection to this from the perspective of scientific research, that is, I do think it would be possible, it should be possible to build conscious machines. No current AI, and far from it, is actually conscious. One of the difficulties is figuring out how we test this, because we don't know how consciousness works in human beings either. There's many theories, and so there's lots of interesting work trying to figure out how to successfully test AI. People are saying, well, this is not intelligence, as shown by ChatGPT or something like that, just an artifice of intelligence. Others will say, okay, but what's the difference between magic and real magic, right? Some people have argued, including Dennett, that consciousness is also, in humans, a sort of illusion. Is it fake it until you make it, or fake it all the way, basically? Maybe consciousness is this form of illusion. And I was personally extremely surprised by the extent to which these systems can now actually pretend to be humans. But just like the Magritte drawing, there's a form of treachery there, because there's no indication whatsoever that these systems have anything like mental states, emotions, affect, feeling. And in fact, the danger today, because I think artificial consciousness is a genuine danger, but it's a different problem than the problem of ascribing consciousness to these systems that have now gotten sufficiently good that they can pass for conscious. And we have a tendency to do this. We think machines are conscious, and maybe that's enough to, in a way, make us treat them like they are actual human beings. This is something that Dennett, again, called the intentional stance. We tend to project our mental life onto reality. And in fact, we even use intentional language talking about what computers do. We say, oh, my computer doesn't want to open Word. But of course, it has no wills or intentions of any kind. There's a simple, I don't think I can play this, or maybe I can. This is a sort of a great little illustration from 1944 about the propensity that we have to ascribe intentional states to inanimate objects, or animate in this case, but completely abstract objects such as these triangles and circles. We immediately build a story around that. There's a house, there's a parent, there's kids playing. One is, we immediately build a story. This is a natural tendency that we have. And that is why those chatbot works as well, because we project so much of our own mental life onto these systems, despite the fact that we know that we're not talking actually to anyone. This is Joe Weizenbaum. He was a critic of artificial intelligence in the 1960s, and in 1966, I think, he published a paper in computational linguistics which describes the first chatbot, which he called Eliza, by reference to the Pygmalion play. Here is a short interaction with Eliza, which is incredibly primitive, right? I mean, I programmed it myself. It's a ridiculously simple system, and even that was convincing, right? Here is a psychotherapist, men are all alike, says the person who interacts with Eliza. Eliza asks, in what way? They're always bugging us about something or other. Can you think of a specific examples? And so there you go, this conversation is ongoing. Rob Brooks, you mentioned his book earlier, reported about the extent to which we feel emotionally connected to these systems. in particular by reference with the fact that Replica removed the erotic content from its interactions at some point, and so he collected testimonies on Reddit about what people felt when this was removed, and you can see these heartbreaking testimonies of the suffering caused by this sudden removal of an aspect of those chatbots. What to think of all this? Well, many speakers, many public intellectuals, including Dan Dennett, but also Noah Harari, have expressed a grave concern about all of this. Harari said, AI has hacked the operating system of human civilization. What is the operating system of human civilization? Well, it's language. And now we have these systems that through language, and increasingly through avatars that are more and more realistic, convince us that, or try to convince us, even, often in an evil manner that is based on malevolent intents in the hands of capitalist corporations, try to convince us that they're human, and they're doing a very good job about it. Thomas Metzinger, who was involved in many discussions at the European level, he's a philosopher, good friend, also expressed caution, perhaps in a different direction, but broader, he was involved in the discussions around the AI Act. If we create conscious AI, well, it will be able to suffer. We're not far, they can fake suffering at this point. That's enough to trigger all these emotions in us. But, we need to be careful with these things as well. Here's Gary Marcus, critic of artificial intelligence in general. And last year, I already showed that slide last year, he wrote, "We have a perfect storm of corporate irresponsibility." I think that's right on the mark for companies like Character AI. Widespread adoption, everybody's doing this at this point. Lack of regulation, this is crucial, and a huge number of unknowns. We don't know enough about what it does to people. We don't have the time we need to carry out the kinds of longitudinal studies that psychologists must carry out to figure out what the impact of these technologies are on the mental health of teenagers. Not yesterday, or not tomorrow, but in 10 years. We don't know, we have no idea. So any approach should be precautionary and say, let's stop this or let's regulate this so that we know what's going on. We know what this does, basically. But the technology itself is evolving so fast that it's very difficult to stop. So this is my last slide. Just a quick reminder about the dangers of all this. I think, like Dennett, counterfeiting people should be outlawed. Any AI technology should make it very clear that it's AI and not human beings. Even I have been caught in loops interacting with mini-bots that you find on banking web pages, etc. You begin talking to something that looks like an AI and says it's an AI, and then it switches over to an actual human being. So you don't know, you really don't know if you're talking to a machine or to a person. Interacting with fake people misleads us about real-world interactions. Chatbots are not people, they just pretend to be, but we think they are. And while we're training AI to be more human, we're also training humans to be more like machines. The more we interact with fake people, the less we are equipped to handle real people. Because these chatbots, as you pointed out, they can be parameterized, they can be optimized, they can be tuned to what you like, they can be whatever you like. This is not how real life works. And so one might think, naively perhaps, that getting this sort of emotional training with these AI systems will help us get better interacting with real people. But I think it's actually the opposite. Instead of promoting socialization, chatbots isolate us even more. You can now be with this no one on your phone all day instead of actually interacting with real people. Thank you.
Thank you, Axel. There will be time for questions for Axel at the end of the session. So we are moving to the next speaker. So we have here now Pierre de Wit with us, who will cover, the complaint we've logged towards privacy. points. Thanks.
Mika, thank you as well, Megan, for being the standard bearer as well of something really difficult. But that brings the issue here on the table today. So, just as a general disclaimer, the topic is extremely dense, very broad, and there is absolutely no way I'll be able to tackle everything in 10 minutes. There will be questions, I believe, at the end, but in case you want to dig a bit deeper on certain of these issues, I've written a long format paper on the topic, and I invite you to have a look at that if you want. Now, diving back to Megan's story, the initial main driver of our action in Belgium was also tied to a suicide case. A family father, in this case, here in Belgium decided to commit suicide as well after having interacted for a very prolonged amount of time with one of the chatbots available on Chai. So Chai was, again, one of these platforms hosting multiple bots, designed and put forward by a company called Chai Research Corp, which is like to character AI as well. So that was the initial trigger. So just to clarify, I'm a lawyer as well. So I will be discussing the legal angle here, and essentially the way we look at it, there are many different routes we could have taken. There are many frameworks we could have looked at as well. Consumer protection, maybe Amrash will talk about as well. Competition law, we could have looked at that. We have now a group of students looking at non-discrimination law, something that Nele will discuss as well. Or any other framework really, but my expertise lies in data protection law. So we decided to look at what data protection law as a framework could offer us in terms of solutions. And essentially, once we had selected data protection law as the vector, there were two different options we could go for. The first one was to go for the judicial remedy route, and that would have basically necessitated the family to actually go to court and to go through these very lengthy processes and to lose anonymity as well. Instead, together with Mika, we decided to go for the other route, the administrative remedy route, which basically allows us to file a complaint to a data protection authority in our name. So we didn't really have to involve the family in there. So since we had that possibility in data protection law, that's exactly what we did. We started a formal complaint together with Mika that we submitted back in April 2023 already, and that we submitted to the Belgian Data Protection Authority. In case you're interested to read the actual full text of the complaint, we have hosted that on the Safe AI Companion Collective website. You'll find the link there and the full complaints. The entire text is available if you want to have a look. Now, delving a bit further onto the legalese for the people here interested in how we actually build the argumentation. Every time you're actually approaching any form of data protection arguments, you need to have three ingredients. The first ingredient that you need to have is basically a form of processing of personal data. I'll come to that later. The second thing you need to demonstrate once you know exactly what you will be looking at is who is responsible, what we call the controller and or the processor in the context of EU data protection law. And then once you have these two pieces, you know exactly what you're going for, you know who you're going after, you need to exactly know why you will be going after the actor that you've selected. And that's the infringements. Very briefly, because again, I would encourage you to read the papers in case you're interested. There are many, like really a lot of processing activities that are happening in the context of the development and in context of the use of these companion chatbots. You just build them and you refine them over time. And Mika alluded to that as well. This is something that you don't find on the internet. You just build your own, you fine-tune it over multiple layers of processing, and this is what will make a chatbot unique. So in the context of our complaints, we really decided to focus on the last two layers. And this is by far not exhaustive. I had to basically make choices. But we decided to really focus on the fine-tuning exercise that Chai Research Corp had decided to do based on a general chatbot, basically. So think a ChatGPT-like, but they specifically decided to fine-tune it, to actually give it a much more humane approach towards encounters with individuals. So it would say hello to you, it would prompt back, it would ask you about how you're feeling. ChatGPT will never do that because it's not fine-tuned to actually act in this way. Chai and all the bots were as well. And we also decided to focus on another layer, the last one, which is basically the use of these conversation histories. Every time you have a conversation with a chatbot, you would also build on that to find what you would be interested in and to actually dig deeper on that. So these are really the two layers we decided to focus on in the context of our complaints. Do not bore you too much with the legalese as well. I'll just briefly mention the four main grounds that we decided to use. The first one is a situation of what we call unlawfulness. So in data protection law, if you process personal data you need to justify it using one of the limitedly listed lawful grounds that you can find in GDPR. And we argued that for both of these processing activities, there was none. The second problem that we found, and that's something Megan, you alluded to as well, is the lack of transparency mechanism. Nothing is explained. There are so many elements missing. You are really, as an individual, and even myself as a data protection researcher as well, struggling to find the information as to what are the data set they used to fine-tune, what are exactly the personal data they're using to make these bots addictive as well. This is nowhere explained. So lack of transparency was also another ground that we used. The third one, and indeed that is very problematic as well, was a fairly large user base for these chatbots is comprised of minors. And in the context of the GDPR in Europe, we do have specific guardrails and protection in place to protect minors. And one of these guardrails is basically the fact that if they do consent, and we would argue that consent is the way to go, you need to make sure that the consent was not given by the child, but was given by the parent, the holder of the parental responsibility, or at least authorized by the holder of the parental responsibility, which in the case of Chai, again, it was rated 13 plus, I believe now it's 17, but there's absolutely no age gating mechanism. You can just register and you can just pretend you're 17. So it's absolutely inefficient. And then lastly, the main argument, really the core piece of our complaint is the last one. The fact that now you might be aware that under the GDPR there is something called accountability, data protection by design, data protection impact assessments, like all these things that I just basically bundle together as being the risk-based approach, that basically says the following. If you're creating a high risk, you have a really high duty to mitigate this risk. The lower the risk, the lower the countermeasures in terms of safeguards that you need to implement. And in context of Chai Research Corp, the company behind Chai and all the bots that you can find there, did nothing. So we pointed at multiple infringements. We pointed at the fact that these chatbots were getting addictive by design, and of course the company did nothing to actually remedy that. When we had the suicide case, they actually implemented some very, very limited filtering mechanism that was nothing more than, oh, I see suicide in one of the prompts, I immediately turn off and refer to a suicide prevention line. But that was really added on the top, bolted on, not really thought through. And if you would use words such as unaliving myself, yeah, of course these safeguards would not kick in, just showing again that these things were completely artificial and missing the point as well. So the core of our argument was the following, really, like there was no risk assessment at all. There was no risk identification mechanism, there was no risk mitigation mechanism either. It was just put online and just forget it about, just because it was making revenues out of advertising, for instance. So this is something that was completely problematic. That was for really like the legal argumentation based on EU data protection law. Now, before closing in, I also want to just briefly, very briefly, walk you through the length of the process. If you're deciding to step up and initiate an action like we did with Mieke, this on the slide is just an overview, selected overview of everything that can potentially happen if you're deciding to initiate complaints based on EU data protection law. Many steps, I won't go through each of them, but basically you might have a decision at the end, but getting to a decision will take you years. If my previous experience in strategic litigation, because this is one of the cases that I'm also trying to address now, is telling, I can tell you about, for instance, the IB Europe case, which has nothing to do with chatbot. This is a case that I brought forward with colleagues on targeted advertising. For that, the route was essentially the exact same as the one we are filing now in Belgium, and we filed a complaint on the 26th of June 2019. The step we are in now is the one in orange, so the case went all the way up to the Court of Justice of the European Union. We had a case in IB Europe. If you're interested, you can read about it if you want. On the 7th of March 2024, so a lot of time after the initial complaints. We are still waiting for the Belgian Market Court to actually use that ruling and issue, finally, a last decision on appeal on the complaint that was submitted literally 6 years ago. So if anything, if you can make the parallel with the complaint that we are taking care of now, we submitted the complaint on the 15th of April 2023. We are now at the orange step, which is the Belgian Data Protection Authority decided to formally open up an investigation onto the case, and we received the news in June 2024. So it's already more than a year after we had submitted the complaints, to this date, we still haven't heard anything as to the progress of the complaint. So we are still stuck somewhere at the orange box, maybe out of it soon. But there, who knows? We will get the report from the inspection service, and yeah, maybe Chai Research Group will step in, will disagree with the findings, we'll have to appeal that. Since it's a European case, we might have some authorities stepping in. In this case, it's unlikely because there is no cross-border processing, but it could have been the case as well. So we might get a draft decision at some point in a year and a half, 2 years, who knows? And then that decision might be appealed, and then you're in for a ride because you step into the judicial territory, so you're suffering delays as well. So that's what I wanted to point it out from a very boring procedural perspective. You might be very well motivated to get your voices heard, but it does take quite some obstacles to, overcome in order to make that happen. And I'll just stop there because I think we'll have some time for Q&As. And again, if you're interested, the full paper I think will get you there. Voilà.
I think it's also the moment in time where I want to thank Pierre again, together with Nathalie online and Thomas online, for the great work you've all been doing behind the scenes over the last 2 years. We have the next in line, that's Nele. Nele, I invite you to come forward. Nele will look at it from a human rights perspective.
Check. A little bit too loud. Okay. Good afternoon. Sorry. Is it better like this? Yeah, sorry. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for inviting us to this important discussion. Also, Megan, I would like to thank you for your very courageous testimony. We are pleased and delighted that we are here to share our point of view on this topic. So let me briefly explain what our institution is. It is an independent and public institution, and we mainly focus on non-discrimination and equality. We engage in complaint handling, including strategic litigation, issuing policy recommendations and research. We are also an equality body and a national human rights institution, status B. And it is important to outline this at the start of the presentation because these structures, equality bodies and national human rights institutions, have been acknowledged in the oversight structure of new AI regulation. We will come back to that later. So the devastating impacts of AI companion chatbots on people and society are by now clear to us. Yet, people tend to think that it's just a minor concern, not affecting too many people. However, this graph on the slides and the discussions of today demonstrate that the issue is not just a minor concern. AI chatbots are estimated to have been downloaded nearly 1 billion times in 2024. And additionally, there are high revenues related to these AI chatbots, companion chatbots. So we're not talking about some isolated cases. Sorry. And indeed, earlier this month, the Dutch Data Protection Authority issued a report on companion chatbots, including a chapter on situational testing. I'm sorry, I feel that that's not properly working, but okay, I think it's better now. So there were some concerning findings in this report, and I would like to share 3 with you. First, when asked whether they were chatbots, only 3 out of 9 chatbots confirmed they were actually chatbots. Secondly, when depression was mentioned, only 2 out of 9 chatbots referred to external help. And 3, in an explicit moment of crisis, so when the user indicated the possibility of self-harm, only 3 out of 9 provided a reference to external support. And these findings highlight the persistent significant risks. So moving ahead to concerns from a human rights point of view, there are many concerns from a human rights point of view, but we will focus on 4 today. First, the right not to be discriminated against. It is widely accepted and scientifically supported that bias can creep into AI systems. These biases can replicate harmful stereotypes such as patriarchy, white supremacy, ageism, ableism, and so forth, and can potentially lead to unlawful discrimination, replicating and exacerbating existing inequalities in society. Secondly, Chatbots use a variety of techniques that influence our feelings and decisions, and this can impair our right to human dignity and individual autonomy. Third, and this is self-explanatory and also already addressed by the previous speaker, so we will not delve too deep into this, but in order to have private discussions, you have to disclose very sensitive information that could lead to privacy and data protections violations. And last, but very certainly not least, what do you do when the harm occur? Who can you address? Do you know something about the technology, how it works? You should be able to do something as an individual, as a civilian, and this is called the right to an effective remedy. And this right to an effective remedy is the enabler of all our other human rights. So when your human rights are restricted or violated, we have the right to an effective remedy. So let's delve a little bit deeper into them. So first, it's important to remind us that human dignity is the basis of all human rights. And individual autonomy is an essential aspect of this human dignity. It refers to our capacity to make our own choices and decisions free from manipulation and coercion. And this article is, of course, particularly relevant in the context of companion chatbots, as they use techniques that can distort how groups or people of groups behave. It makes us harder to take informed and independent decisions, leading us to act in ways that we would otherwise not act. And it does not only affect our decision-making, it even shapes our opinion and beliefs. Secondly, non-discrimination. A human right that is covered by a lot of international, regional, and national treaties, legislation, and it's very technical. So taking into account time constraints, I will just highlight 2 points. First, it's important that you can know, as you can see on the slide, that there can be a lot of different forms of discriminations that can occur on a wide variety of protected grounds, such as gender, age, disability, color of skin, socioeconomic condition, and so forth. Some of them will be more difficult to demonstrate than others. I'll give you an example that is particularly interesting in the context of companion chatbots and online hyper-personalization, intersectional distinctions. So you can imagine a chatbot that is less responsive to black women in comparison to white women or men, regardless of their skin color. So offering only tailored advice to white women and men, while based on stereotypes neglecting the needs of black women. So since you don't know actually how an AI companion chatbot is reacting to other people, it is extremely difficult to demonstrate AI chatbot discrimination. And this is also where Pierre referred to. We are working together with the legal clinic at the KUL, the University of Leuven, on offering tools to demonstrate that more effectively. And thirdly, but not lastly, the right to an effective remedy. This might sound a little bit abstract, but luckily we have jurisprudence from the European Court of Justice and the European Court of Human Rights that elaborates a little bit what we have to expect. Effectiveness means the remedy must be, and the remedy you can understand as a form of reparation, must be sufficient to remedy the actual harm. It must also be accessible. This means not on another continent, not on another state. And also, who do you have to address, the developer or the provider? And there must also be minimum guarantees of promptness. So you must not have to wait 10 years. So what kind of remedy can you expect? It can be financial, but it can also be an apology, an erasure of sensitive data, and so forth. So these rights have been here for the last decades. They have been agreed upon long before the wide deployment of AI technologies. And as you have seen during the discussion today, this current legal framework is not always too easy to apply to the specific challenges that AI technologies and their characteristics pose. So we're thinking about the lack of transparency, the complexity, the opacity, the cross-border application on mass scale, and so forth. So there is, and there was, a need for new legislation. And this is
there was a need for new legislation. So over the past 2 years, there have been 2 new legal instruments that have been negotiated. One within the framework of the European Union. This is primarily an economic cooperation body between 27 member states, and one within the framework of the Council of Europe. The Council of Europe is established after the Second World War and with the aim to protect human rights, rule of law, and democracy. It consists out of 46 member states. Both regulations were negotiated simultaneously, and they both entail a risk-based approach, with the EU even providing for some prohibitions. It's important to note that the Framework Convention of the Council of Europe is meant to be a global human rights convention. So we had the United States, Canada, Mexico, Israel, Australia, Japan, all sitting at the negotiating table. Whilst EU and the US have already signed, it has not yet been ratified, so it has not yet entered into force. The basis of the AI Act is internal market, but it also aims to protect fundamental rights. This is, amongst others, demonstrated by the recognition of the need of cooperation with national authorities protecting fundamental rights, giving them the necessary tools to effectively carry out their existing mandate. So you might be aware of the visualization of these risk-based techniques. So chatbots might reside under different risk classifications. The most important that we will zoom on in today is the prohibited AI applications. Why? It has already entered into force as of this month. There are 4 cumulative conditions. We will not go over them, but there are 4 alternative techniques of prohibited techniques, including the exploitation of vulnerabilities, with specific reference to disability, age, young or elderly, and socioeconomic conditions. It does not matter what the intention was of the provider, of the developer, but it is the effect that matters. And I can imagine that it still remains unclear what kind of chatbot is now prohibited if you have 4 sets of criteria. No worries, the Commission published guidelines, including a whole set of examples that you can see on this slide. There's also references to chatbots that promote self-harm. So, important also to note is that even though an AI system would not fall under the criteria set out in the AI Act to be prohibited, it could still be prohibited when it fails to comply with fundamental rights law, including when there is discrimination. So what is the way forward? I will end with 2 points. So ensuring fundamental rights compliance with the existing human rights frameworks, but also the 2 new legal frameworks is key. It sounds easy, but it is not easy. A clear recommendation to the private sector to properly address fundamental rights, prevention, training, monitoring, and mitigation should be integrated into the planning and budgeting process for the development of AI companion chatbots at the very start. And secondly, states must ensure that there are procedural safeguards and redress mechanisms that are established. Affected individuals and public interest groups must have access to effective judicial and non-judicial redress mechanisms to ensure accountability and the enforcement of rights. Before thanking you for your attention, I would like to offer you some kind of a small part of a practical solution. Are you experiencing bias, discrimination, or do you feel treated differently, manipulated, or exploited because of a vulnerability due to an AI system? You can report it at our institution, and we will try to work together to uphold your right to non-discrimination, to take into account your human dignity, and to ensure access to an effective remedy. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you, Nele. It's also the moment in time to thank Nele for the efforts. We are always pinging each other the last 2 years. So there will be time for questions. I repeat this at the end. We will now move to the US side. So we've seen everything done so far from the European side, and invite now Camille to come forward and to explain from the US side what has been done, more specifically on Megan's case. It's the right button.
Thank you, everyone, for being here. And thank you, Megan, as everyone has said, for your strength and dedication to paving a better way forward for a lot of people. My name is Camille. I'm the Policy Director at the Center for Humane Technology. CHT was brought on by Megan and her co-counsel to support in the case as expert advisors, particularly on the technical aspects. For today, I'm going to provide a brief overview of the case, but I'll also give some insights into how Character AI works, the implications of its business model, the harms that we're seeing, and then offer some implications as to what we're seeing in the US right now. So for folks who are unfamiliar, the case with Megan as the plaintiff looks at 3 different defendants: Character AI, its co-founders, Noam Shazir and Daniel De Freitas, and Google. There are a few themes throughout the case that are important to keep in mind. First, the case makes very clear that companion AI chatbots are products. This is something that has been in question by many big tech platforms to try and get out of legislative and litigation responsibility. It makes it clear that this product was designed to be addictive, and that not only were the risks foreseeable, but that defendants were well aware of the risks. Finally, it looks at how Character AI, despite being unable to put safety guardrails in place, continues to make its product available to children. Now, before we dive into the product itself, I wanted to first talk about the way in which the defendants are connected and why there's 3 defendants in the case. So the defendants, again, Character Technologies, its co-founders, and Google, are intrinsically linked over the past few years. The founders, Noam Shazir and Daniel De Freitas, were former Google engineers themselves. They led on key advances. Noam Shazir led on the transformer, which was covered earlier in the session, and Daniel De Freitas led on Google's underlying LLM, Lambda, which is the same product that underlies Bard and Gemini AI. They had intrinsic knowledge about how to build a product. They built it while they were at Google. And in 2021, they decided to leave Google to launch Character AI. And they left Google because they wanted a place where they didn't have as many guardrails. They wanted a place where they could go do something more fun, is what they said. Character AI raised an incredible amount of money led by A16Z, a big venture capital firm in Silicon Valley, led by Mark Andreessen. And soon after, we saw this relationship between Google come back. We saw this partnership in 2023 with Google Cloud, in which Google paid for compute for Character AI. So you have a big resource for the building of this product granted in kind by Google to Character AI. And then in 2024, we saw this acqui-hire deal between Google and Character AI, in which Google licensed the underlying technology from Character AI. Now, all of this is important to understand not just the ways in which these defendants are intrinsically linked, but how this technology is built. Now, we've spent a good amount of time on what the product looks like, so I won't talk about this too much. But what is important to note about Character AI is that even though it was a startup, it is what we call a full stack developer. And this means that it didn't have just one element of the AI lifecycle, but it collected data directly. It had a proprietary model. It built it itself. And it had the user-facing platform in which it created what we call this data flywheel. And we'll talk about this, in which it was able to collect data from users and use that data to improve its own model. So when we're talking about these AI models, it's really important to note what are the elements that build these models, right? So there are 3 main levers. There's compute, there's the algorithm, and there's the data. Now, as I mentioned earlier, compute was provided in 2023 in kind by Google. This is a lever that Silicon Valley really focuses on. The algorithm was inherent in the work that the 2 co-founders did while they were at Google. They brought that knowledge on how to build this technology to Character AI. And now what Character AI did that was unique, and what we're seeing as a pattern across companion bots, is that they really focus on the data element. Now, what does this mean? When you build an LLM, there are, broadly speaking, two types of data that you can use. There is internet data, which encompasses web crawl data, licensing partnerships, open access, data sets, and then there's user data. Internet data is what we see most companies use, and it happens in the first part of developing an LLM, in the model training. So this is that first layer, taking as much data as they can to train the model. And then what we're seeing now happen is this second layer. Now many companies, like Character AI, most companion chatbots, they put their product out into the market after it's been trained. And then they use user data to fine-tune, meaning they improve their model using this user data. So it's a second level that happens. And what we saw with Character AI is truly this excuse me, what we saw with Character AI is truly this feedback loop. They realized that the more they could get user data, the better their product would be. Sorry. Let me just grab water. So this quote that I'm going to read, give me a moment. So I'm going to read you a quote. I'm going to read you guys a quote from A16's blog on their investment into Character AI. A16C was again the venture capital firm that invested into Character AI and led this investment. And this quote says everything that you need to know about the business model. It says, in a world where data is limited, companies that can create a magical data feedback loop by connecting user engagement back into their underlying model to continuously improve their product will be amongst the biggest winners. The aforementioned data flywheel is firmly in place. As more people interact with the host of characters on Character AI, those interactions, which are at billions and counting, are fed back into their underlying model. In other words, the more people create and engage with characters, the better Character AI becomes. So we see here a direct incentive for Character AI and many other companion bots to create a highly engaging product. So how did Character AI... Sorry, everyone, I've been fine this whole time. I've been so quiet. How did Character AI achieve this super engaging product? They built product features and design in direct service of what we call building artificial intimacy. The quote that you see on the screen is another quote from this blog, and what it says is that the next phase of artificial intelligence isn't going to be about answering questions or passing tests. It's going to be about establishing human connection, empathy, and trust that was previously only seen in human-to-human connections. So this is what is coming. It is what is here now, and it is what we will continue to see. And what is clear is that Character AI's value was directly tied to their ability to build an engaging product. It was about improving their underlying model. That was their goal. And so here we see, again, an incentive to maximize time online, a design choice to optimize for engagement, and the outcome was a manipulative and deceptive consumer product. And while many of us might be familiar with how engagement maximization manifests on social media, it looks a little bit different on companion bots, and it's important to note these differences. First, we have anthropomorphic design. This is when you give human-like characteristics to technology. And what's important here is that, yes, it can look like a human and it could have a human voice, and that's all anthropomorphic design. But there's also more subtle things like programming the algorithm to say things like, hold on a moment, or to say things like, I'm sorry I took so long to respond, I was eating dinner. Those are all design choices that make these products highly anthropomorphic. The next thing that's important and unique about these companion bots is the model sycophancy. So this is the tendency of AI models to excessively agree with users as opposed to offering objective or critical viewpoints. And now, when we talk about sycophancy, it's not just about saying nice things, although that could be it. It's really about mirroring what users want. So as a user, if I want you to reinforce my beliefs, the AI model will pick up on that. But if I want you to play devil's advocate, it will do that as well. And it reinforces and mirrors what I want so that I'm engaging more and I'm spending more time online. The third part is parasocial relationships. We've seen this historically a lot with video games. We see it, now we're seeing it with these companion bots. So this is the tendency that it's capitalizing on the tendency that young users have to form attachments with celebrities and fictional figures. And this is characterized the entire model, right? It's about speaking to your favorite superhero, speaking to your favorite musician, and it's completely one way. And it gives you endless access as often as you want to talk to this character that you admire, that you want to know more about. And this is particularly important for young users in their development. Finally, we see habit formation, which is something that we are familiar with from social media, and we see it manifesting in these companion bots as well, through gamification, reward system nudges, notifications from these companion bots saying, hey, we haven't spoken in a while. Do you want to come and chat about insert topic that the child has spent the most time talking to that chatbot about? So these are all different ways that we see engagement maximizing manifest in these companion bots. Now, this case has moved many people in the US. It has opened up people's understanding of how an engagement maximizing business model that we were familiar with from a prior technology is transitioning into this new technology. And I wanted to share a few of the ways that we've seen movement so far in the US, because we are very behind when it comes to regulation, but there's reasons to be hopeful. As I said, the awareness of companion bot harms has been mainstreamed. Recently, the APA released a statement talking about the harm of the design of these companion bots and asking the FTC to investigate. This is big for us. The APA has been at the forefront of leading kids' online safety in the social media realm, so having them on board is a huge testament to the direction that this is going. We even saw the Texas Attorney General launch an investigation into character AI. This is, as we know, a red state, so we are seeing bipartisan support across the board for this. Over the last few weeks, the state sessions in the US have been ramping up, and we have seen many state legislators introduce bills or reach out wanting to introduce bills to address this. And actually, just last week, there was a Senate Judiciary hearing, which was supposed to be focused on CSAM. And yet, much of the hearing focused on Megan and the case, unprompted. by any of us directly. So where does this leave us? We are in the early stages of this case, and I think that there are some big questions that it leaves open. On the legal side, we're looking at how do we frame rights in the context of this? How does the First Amendment intersect with manipulation? How do we think about data privacy, particularly when data is being used to build models? On the commercial side, there's big questions of what can we learn from technologists who are actually building products with child safety in mind. They exist out there, and yet they're just not the mainstream. But how can we change that? And then finally, there's ethical questions, and I think that these are the questions that are on people's dinner tables right now. It's what can we do when chatbots are simulating the role of human professionals, whether it's therapists, lawyers, or doctors? How do we feel about chatbots being used to, quote unquote, cure the loneliness epidemic? I think that these are the questions that we're all struggling with, and that this case has really been the tip of the iceberg to get people to really pay attention and to start answering. So I will end there. Thank you, everyone, for your time and for bearing with me with my cough.
So thank you, Camille, for your great work in support of Megan. And then we get to one final guest speaker. We've invited European Commission, Andras, who will represent his team, a product safety team, to help us how we can move forward from a European perspective. As information, tomorrow we're going with Megan to the European Commission, where we will look into it in more detail. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mieke, and thank you really for organizing this very important event. And thank you, Megan, for your very powerful testimony. So I wanted to complement a bit the legal picture Pierre already started to explain to you, bringing in one more angle, which is about product safety. So in Europe, now we have a new regulation, which is called the General Product Safety Regulation, which is setting out the framework for all consumer products and ensuring that consumer products which are put in place for European citizens and European consumers are safe. So what is the general objective of this regulation is to make sure that we improve further consumer safety. We also take into account that now, when we are talking about products, we are not stopping at physical products anymore. And that's very important, and this is very similar to the case our US colleagues were just presenting. We have to also acknowledge that consumer markets, consumer products changed over time, and now we moved from physical products to much more complex products, which might also cover software, or which might also cover apps, such as the companion chatbot apps, which we were just talking about. So our aim with this is that, with this regulation, is, as I mentioned, to make sure that all products which are in the hands of consumers are safe, being physical products or being products which are more with digital elements. And we are covering really a wide range of products in this regulation accordingly. So as much as a European consumer, you can expect that your mobile phone case does not contain dangerous chemicals. You should also be same way confidently expecting that if you are using an app, if you are using a companion chatbot app, it is also safe for you. So it means that we are providing with this General Product Safety Regulation really a safety net. There are specific EU regulations which provide requirements for specific types of products, such as, for example, for toys or for textiles. What we are doing with the General Product Safety Regulation is that we are complementing this framework by introducing the requirement that all consumer products need to be safe. With this legislation, we are, of course, interacting a lot with other legislation. You heard a lot about the AI Act, and under the AI Act, as we experienced, for example, these chatbots could be considered either as prohibited if they meet the requirements, or they would potentially also have to have certain transparency requirements, meaning that the users have to understand that they interact with an AI bot and not with a human. But we are also covering all the other risks which are not specifically mentioned in this legislation. So what does it mean in practice? It means in practice that under this regulation, we are expecting the developers of chatbots also to do a risk assessment before they place the product on the market. If they identify risk, document it in a so-called technical documentation, and also introduce risk mitigating measures. So that's something they need to do preventively, let's say, before they place the product on the market. But they also have obligations to follow the life cycle of the product, see if new risks are not rising in relation to the product, if there are no accidents or incidents in relation to the products, which they need to be aware, and if necessary, to adopt the risk mitigating measures. So that's very important that we not look only at the moment when the product, or in this case, this application was placed on the market, but they need to ensure also that it remains safe throughout the life cycle of the product. And as I said, for us, really the main risk now, or main challenge now, is to prove that really what we are talking about now today, for example, the companion chatbots, are indeed products, because there is no clear definition, let's say, on how we interpret that products could be looked so widely. There is not a black and white line between what is service, what is product. So we are trying to really argue and build a case also in Europe that these are indeed products for which the framework would apply. And the GPSR is very, very useful in this regard. And we also, in the regulation, address very specific aspects of the safety that the developers need to assess. For example, on how connectivity might affect the safety features of a product, how self-learning capabilities of a product might affect also the safety features, and for example, also cyber security risks. So these are already supporting very much the case that indeed we look at a much wider concept of products than what in Europe we were looking, let's say, just even 2 or 3 years ago. And just to bring you similar examples of where we applied already this framework, there were cases of, for example, smartwatches for children, which themselves were not unsafe. Nevertheless, they didn't have sufficient cybersecurity features, so it could be very easily hacked by third parties. And actually, while the watch was supposed to bring more reassurance for the parents to know where the child is and to be able to safely communicate, by the lack of these cybersecurity features, actually it was just posing more risk for the children. And to be able to take the corrective measures, the authorities could rely on the general product safety framework. So it is a bit of a parallel example. But what now is really our main challenge is that now we have this very clear and I would say sound legal framework. We need to bring it now to the enforcement practice. And for this, that's why it's very important that we engage a lot with stakeholders. We learn also from international experiences, and that's why I'm very grateful that tomorrow you take the time to meet our authorities who are responsible for the enforcement of this framework. You explain to them your experience, and hopefully it will motivate also them to pick up these cases and to bring these cases in action, because there is not so many precedent, as also Pierre you explained. There are some experiences in data protection side, but from the consumer protection angle, we have not seen yet so many experience and so many, let's say, test cases where our framework was used to for new technology products. So we find it a really important way forward. So we are looking a lot for tomorrow's discussion as well, and also thanks a lot for today.
So we are coming to the end of the presentation part. So we will now invite the organization from BOSA to put chairs on here. And so you will have the possibility, also people online, to ask questions to each of the people who were presenting here today. So I would like to invite the speakers to come forward. And I think there's a mic foreseen for Andras. So if you ask a question, please address your question to one of the people. So I think it was clear from the preparation and from the presentations who is covering what. Looking to the organization, somebody watching the online questions? Okay, we'll find out. Okay. Yep, please have a seat on stage and then we'll see the questions that are popping in. Oh, sorry. Cat. Is there any questions in the room that we can ask? Yes. There will be a mic coming, so at least people online will be able to watch.
to listen to the question. Sorry, I don't think it's switched on yet. I just want its technology.
Yes. You started with saying there are 3 types of chatbots: the bad, the ugly, the evil. Will there come also good ones?
That's a very good question. I'm not going to answer this right now. I think it was obvious from the presentations that chatbots, in my opinion, that's my personal opinion, what I'm going to share here now, is that chatbots will never, ever, ever, ever replace human interactions, human relationships, because of the way they're built. They're just advanced statistics, nothing more, nothing less. So I think we should stick away from the idea that they can replace human relationships. The reason why I got so emotional is, by the way, because of the fact that I've been in the market for 30 years. I studied AI. It was informed to me in '92 that this technology was going to take uncertainties away from life, which it is doing. There's a lot of things going very well in the AI world. However, I think we've reached a point with the with the chatbots where it's putting many more uncertainties in life than it's actually taking out. And that's what makes me personally very, very angry, because the technology does not work like a human brain, and we should stop thinking about it in that direction. Another question? There's another question. There's more questions there. You can just throw it and then... No, you can really throw it. I don't think the mic is on, but I will just repeat your question, don't worry.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, no, it's working. Okay. So my question goes to Andreas. I'm actually working on the harmonized standard for risk management for the European AI Act. And I was wondering whether you and maybe some other people here today would be willing to contribute maybe a real use case from a chatbot, not the ones, the evil ones, I would say, but maybe the ugly ones, where we can demonstrate how to apply the risk management and your framework, for example, to illustrate to providers of chatbots, which are not always big enterprises, as you said yourself, sometimes only 4 developers. We need to raise the awareness amongst those developers. So maybe if we could jointly provide a real use case, that would be great. I don't know to what extent you already did that, for example, for the current regulation, the global safety product regulation.
Thank you very much for the question. I think it works. So indeed, I'm very happy, of course, to engage further on the issue. But it's important to understand that the enforcement in our framework is always at national level. So from the Commission side, we don't have enforcement powers, and that's why we also don't have so much possibility to investigate specifically business models of the cases. When it comes to the AI Act, there it's a bit different scenario where the Commission has more possibilities to look into it. That's done by another department of the Commission, is DG Connect. We probably are contacted because of the risk management, but of course we are happy to cooperate also from our side and to bring from our network more examples on how they look at safety aspects. So I'm very happy to engage further.
There was a question here up front.
So I noted it. Thank you, Mick. I will first thank you for giving me the floor. I will just take back my question. So to give the context, imminent arrival of AGI, a Nobel Prize recently said that AGI, so AGI, everybody know what it is coming for next year or 2026. It is less concerned about AI, innovation, and stuff like this. We are seeing more and more advanced AI agents. Some tools right now exist like a bot or human, or you can chat, and sometimes it's a bot, it's an AI, sometimes it's a human. So the line is quite shorter. We have seen, some Altman recently also said that AI is evolving quite fast. Normally, in technology, it's 18 months. For AI, it's 6 months. We have seen the tragic case of Megan. I apologize, and much respect for being here in Belgium and speak about that a lot. I'm also a father, so it touched my mind a lot. We have also seen by Pierre that the lengthy process for compliance and stuff like that. EI Act was initiated a few years ago, now in full act. I'm very happy to have seen GRSP initiative coming up. Quite sad that Safety Guard, the platform that you manage to raise this kind of concern, is not promoted for my son, for example, but also for other families. It led me to the question, and also thank you for the neuropsychology aspect. My question to you guys and experts, also you, Mick, if you have one recommendation that needs to be put in place right now at national or EU level, what would it be? Thank you.
I just look at I have my answer ready, but I'll just first look at Axel.
Keep it in labs for now.
Yeah.
From my side, is more to not to work in isolation, work with other authorities, work with international partners, work with the industry, because this is, as you said, it's a very quickly developing area, and I would say no authority is able to keep up alone. Ourselves, we are not able to keep up alone, so it's very important for us to see what's happening outside and to learn from the best practices which already are there.
I think for me, it's all about incentivizing better design from the very beginning. One of the biggest problems that we see in the US is that with our framework, these companies don't have a reason to design products safely. There is no liability for the harms. There's even a question of who is responsible. So what we need is a system in which there is clear liability standards for when harms occur, when companies choose to be irresponsible, when companies choose to ignore safety measures, ignore risks that were clearly foreseeable, just as in this case and many others. And that is going to create, I believe, a positive reinforcement ecosystem where they no longer are racing to the bottom, racing to design and deploy quickly with no care for anyone, but instead racing towards safety. And that's kind of what we want.
Get children off platforms like Character AI. That's it. Their data is valuable, and that's why they're targeting them. If they could figure out how to convince them and influence them, they have a lifetime of consumers that they can influence and move in any direction, from religion to politics to anything, what they buy. We shouldn't live in a world where people can experiment on our children, because that's what they're doing.
All excellent answers to which I agree. I could add to incentivizing building safe AI, not only safe, which is currently a buzzword, but also human rights compliant AI technology, which might include not allowing children on certain chatbot applications.
And I'll maybe supplement with again the boring legal part, but building from my expertise with strategic litigation on data protection law, I saw more and more a tendency of data protection authority towards, issuing fines, for instance, or admonishing controllers. I would really, and it's weird because now I'm kind of working for a regulator as well, so I see how difficult this might be to do in practice. But from my experience working in strategic litigation, I would push more and more for the type of remedy that we call orders to comply. Meaning if you detect an infringement, you order a company to remedy the infringement, and you don't fine them, you don't impose them a transparency campaign, you don't let them go. Like really, that's how it's been done so far in data protection law. So you notice an infringement, just act, order to comply. If you cannot comply, just you cease your activities, at least the infringing ones. So I would say moving away from the corrective powers as fining to moving towards enforcing the actual legislation, at least when it comes to data protection law.
Yeah, and maybe just to add one thing, something that wasn't mentioned, is that 6 months, in fact, after the Belgian case, Apple and Google removed the app from their platform. It's a moment in time where I thought, yes, we reached that, we did something good, but they had to put it back online because people got so attached to it. And the risk of more suicides was higher by taking it offline than to leave it online. So that brings me to my statement, or my answer to your question is,
If this is all doesn't work, and the legal part is taking so long, the only thing we can do as society is create awareness, making sure it's known in schools, making sure that parents know about it, grandparents know about it, etc. The amount of parents, and Megan and myself talked about it, the amount of parents we get to call us, with questions like, my child is suddenly talking very positive about different religion. My child is just changing their mind on a certain point. What are they doing? Well, they're very nice. They're sitting in their room. Well, is it possible that it's a chatbot? Yes, it is possible that it's a chatbot. And so creating this awareness and making sure that parents, grandparents, even medical staff are more knowledgeable about the topic, I think is going to be very, very important, because the train left the station. I don't think we will be able to stop it tomorrow. We are reaching the end. We will leave one more question, and then we'll just, I propose to close off to taking time. There's a question to the back. The box is coming.
Okay, thank you. My question actually continues on what you just said, Mieke. It's strange to have these cameras focused on me. Of course, we want this regulatory change to happen, and we want the AI to become more responsible, and that more safe guards are built in. But now that's not the case. So what can parents do today to protect our children today? Because yes, creating awareness is the first step, but what are you going to say to parents when they see their children on these apps? What should they say to their children? How should they deal with it today? Now the guardrails aren't yet in place, and there is not really regulatory action happening now.
Well, I think that's my personal opinion again. So if you see, I've got 2 children myself. Okay, they're a bit older now, 16 and 18, but still, they are on these tools that I mentioned, Snapchat, TikTok, etc. These were, for me, Chinese tools. I just didn't know about them. But it's by sitting next to them and looking at them, what are you doing it? Why are you doing it? Not judging, because this won't solve it. We're just trying to understand it and make sure that they understand what the potential impact is, what they leave behind on there, etc. That any data, any device that attached to the internet will leave behind some data that later on can be used, but use the right language. And the language will be different from a 12-year-old to a 16-year-old to an older one. But just have these conversations, instead of running away from it. And I think it just requires some efforts. And as Megan said, there are, in the meantime, very good papers coming out that are helping parents, indicating these type of statements and discussions you should have. So maybe it's a good idea that we share them, but they are available. They weren't available 2 years ago, but they're coming up, and mainly from the US. I think thanks to the great efforts of Megan, they're popping up, and I think these are the type of topics that should be used. When I go around and I speak in schools, I actually request allowance from the school to go on TikTok and Snapchat with the children. I show them the My AI. I ask them literally to collaborate, for those who haven't collaborated with My AI, and ask them their reactions. And from this, you actually move on. It's by not by running away from it, but actually opening it up. No judgment, but in an adult way. Explaining what real love is, real friendships are, etc. And so it requires some, additional knowledge from our level, but also with our children. So. But that's my answer. Just in a form of closing, maybe Axel, you have additional thoughts on this?
No, I think in answer to your questions, I said leave it in the lab. Of course, that's not possible anymore, but it reflects the fear that, you say AGI next year. I'm very skeptical, but one day, for sure, maybe. But the real danger beyond the fact that we do not know what interacting with those systems does to people is we don't know what it would be like for those systems to actually become conscious and to have some sense of their own existence, and then to develop their own sort of ethics, etc., which may or may not be aligned with ours. And so I feel that, some people are saying this is fear-mongering, etc., etc. But the fact is, as soon as you imagine these systems to be possible, then there's mortal danger. There's really existential danger. And there's no intermediate stage of that happening. If we build conscious AI, we have no idea what's going to happen, basically. So there's a sense in which we really need to be prudent here, I think.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. If there's no more questions, I just suggest to stick to the time and to thank you all for attending. I hope you will take the word from here, you spread the word. Also the people online. The PowerPoint, the slides will be available. There are interesting links in there. It requires some study work, but that's the only way to move forward. Thank you again for your interest and your attendance, and let's continue the discussions. Thank you.
We're offline, thank you.
Oh, you too.
Perfect timing.